So I'm going to show you another way that we could factor, and it's using what's called the AC method. So hopefully we've gotten you up to speed, you've done some guessing and checking, but the whole theme is if you can get the problem into this form and you could rewrite the common factor once and then the remaining pieces of 4x minus 3, then it might prevent you from just guessing and checking. So as a reminder, if you look at this next one, that if you have 4 terms, you can group them, and as I do the greatest common factor of grouping the first 2, that common factor is 6x, and you're left with 2x minus 1. And then if you look at the last 2, your greatest common factor is 7, where you're left with 2x minus 1. And remember, if you distribute these into it, you'll get back to the original. But the final answer, though, is you would rewrite it as 2x minus 1 once, and then your other term would be the 6x plus 7. And this is what we call the AC method, because if we're in the form ax squared plus bx plus c, you multiply the a and the c together. So the reality of our situation would be, so far I think all I've shown you is how to factor by guessing. So you might be looking at that and saying, well, I could guess lots of different things. I could guess 2x times 2x. I could guess 3 times 2. There's a lot of different guesses you could have. But this is a foolproof way of figuring this out. Now it is going to take some practice, so you might not get it right away. You start with the 4 and you multiply by the ending number, which is negative 6. And 4 times negative 6 is negative 24. And now you want to do just like what we did in the previous section, where you want 2 factors of this number that add to be 5. So the trick is that it's 8 and negative 3. Think of it as this way: 8x minus 3x gives you 5x. So if I go back to that problem, you rewrite that trinomial, except you replace the 5x with 8x minus 3x. Now this is what's so nice about this problem, is if you accidentally mess it up, or I shouldn't say mess it up because it wouldn't even be messing up, but if you wrote negative 3x first and then 8x, you'll still get the correct answer. So sometimes I actually suggest students do this because sometimes it's just nice that this thing is a plus sign. So now from here, you can group things together because you have 4 terms and your greatest common factor. Well, if you look at the greatest common factor of the first piece, all you have is an x that's in common. And you're left with 4x minus 3. And what's in common between the last term is 2. And when you do that, you're left with, again, 4x minus 3. So without having to guess and check, your final answer in factored form, you write 4x minus 3 once, and your other term is left with x and 2. And you can double check that this is correct because you can multiply this out. 4x times x is 4x squared. The outside is 8x. The inside is negative 3x. That gives me 5x. And negative 3 times 2 is negative 6. So as I move on to the next thing, and sometimes people call this splitting the middle. It's just not a phrase I'm really, I guess I just don't use it very often, but you could call it split the middle. So if we do this AC method, start with doing 6 times 10. Okay, that's 60. Factors of 60, there's a lot of them. You could try 2 and 30. You can do 3 and 20. The one that we should be looking for, though, is 4 and 15. So how you would do this problem, leave 6x squared alone, leave the 10 alone, but rewrite that middle piece as 4x plus 15x. And again, you could switch those 2 around. It actually doesn't matter. And as you group the first 2, greatest common factor there is 2x, 3x plus 2. Greatest common factor of the last 2 terms is 5. And again, you're left with 3x and 2. And so you have the same piece in here, so you write that once. And then your other piece would be 2x plus 5. I don't know if I need to highlight to emphasize, this piece you write once. And where you get everything else, this 2x goes right here. I don't like the color of that. And then 5 goes right there. So there's no longer any guessing and checking. The difference with this next one is I would encourage you to do the greatest common factor first. And that's what this first mistake would be, is what product must you use to split apart. What I would do is I would actually rewrite this 6 and, well, all 3 of these numbers. So I'm not even going to do the problem this way. I would do the greatest common factor first. So as you do this, all 3 of those numbers are divisible by 3. So I'm just going to cross this out. I don't really like this question, so I'm going to do this my own way. 2x squared minus 11x and 3 times 12. So now as I try to do the AC method, 2 times 12 would be 24. Factors of 24 that add to be 11, again, are 8 and 3, and to make it work, make it -8 and -3. So this 3 just goes along for the ride. That's the way I like to phrase it. So you have 2x squared minus 8x minus 3x. That 12 is still there. And now when I split the middle, if you like that phrase, go ahead and use it. Otherwise, you can group the way I've been saying it. And your greatest common factor in the first 2 terms is 2x. And you're left with x minus 4. And then the greatest common factor in the last 2 is -3. And be careful, you have to change the sign of each. So it is x minus 4. Like I said earlier, that 3 is still in front. So your final answer would be writing the 3 in front. And then you have x minus 4 once. And then 2x minus 3. Just like that. So that's the, I guess, advantage if you do the greatest common factor first. And I guess I'm doing letter E as my first exercise. And I just want to point out that you could do this without doing the greatest common factor first. And I'm pretty sure when I share the answer key to these notes, because I will do that in Google Classroom, that the answer key might have a different answer here for A through D. But I want you to do this problem correctly, so I just went ahead and did option E as I stepped, process through it. So here's a few more problems that we're going to do the greatest common factor. Sorry, there is no greatest common factor, but you can still do the AC method. So as you're looking through that, 4 times -15, that gives me an answer of -60. I actually said this number earlier of 3 and -20. If you notice, my advice to you is I like to have my first piece be the negative one. So I'm rewriting -17x as -20x plus 3x. And the reason why I like to do that is because then this sign is positive. And I tend to find more students have success when this sign is positive. So we have a greatest common factor of 4x. You're left with x minus 5. Greatest common factor with the next piece is 3 with another x minus 5. And you know you're doing it correctly when these two things are the same. So you write that once. And then your other piece of 4x and 3. That's your final answer. Double check it's right. By all means, FOIL it out. X times 4x is 4x squared. The outside is 3x. Inside is -20x. Yeah, that was -17x. And your last term of -5 times 3 is -15. And just one more to practice. 4 times -16 is -64. Factors of -64 might be trickier to come up with. But I want to say it's just 2 and 32. And maybe I'll even show you, if you don't have the negative in there, in the spot I suggested, you would still get the right answer. oh rats, I think I did this wrong because I wanted to have a greatest common factor. Okay, we'll work it out. So this is the mistake that you do if you don't do a greatest common factor first. So if I group the first two things together, in greatest common factor there is 2x, and I'm left with 2x plus 1. If I look at the next piece, I have a negative 16 that goes into each, and again I'm left with 2x plus 1. I'm going to write my next piece over here, so that equals 2x plus 1, write that once, and my other piece is 2x minus 16. However, this is what I was trying to say earlier, I didn't consider the greatest common factor of this first piece. So what I should have done is factored out a 2 out of that, and everything else, you know, the 2x plus 1 I can't change, and but by factoring out a 2 there, that piece would have came out to be, I'm going to use green, there we go, is just 1x minus 8. There we go. So this is your best answer. And you don't even have to write the 1 in front. You can just leave it as x minus 8. So I'll erase that. And that is your perfect answer. So you should be ready for the homework. And it's just more practicing. I want to point out, though, if you prefer guess and check, you have my support. I completely support. I think this is a great strategy. And if it's working for you, good. Good. Use it. If it's not, I'm trying to give you a new method to try, and if that's not working, ask me and I can show you another method to use for your homework. But you have to ask me in class.